I hate to interrupt good fellowship, but I want to get us out of here on time, and I want to give our speaker as much time as he deserves. Friends, again, welcome. And our speaker today does not need an introduction to the vast majority of you, but as I mentioned, Steve Eason, one of the most impactful pastors in the history of Myers Park Presbyterian Church. And most people love everything about Steve except that he graduated from Duke. But other than that, I will say that it is an amazing privilege to follow a pastor who has had a vital, healthy ministry, and to come into a system that is humming and churning. And it's been an amazing gift for me, and a testament to the effectiveness of Steve Eason's ministry here to follow him. We had a chance to talk at a next church gathering in Atlanta, and I think we talked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, as I was considering this potential call. And everything that Steve told me was the truth about how this place had been such an amazing... I'm not lying. Yeah, he did not say run. He did not say run. He said run to it. But I do just want to mention, as I mentioned earlier, that, again, when you think about the history of this congregation and you think about the milestone moments in this church, and you think about where we are today in terms of our work in Greer Heights, what's happening with the church's role in the national church, Steve Eason is a huge part of the reason that we are where we are. We would not be in Greer Heights without the Campaign for Deeper Discipleship. I hear people still talk about his sermon to this day about a challenge to go into deeper water, and people use that metaphor in meetings all the time. The growth of this church, the number of young families that came here during his tenure, Steve Eason's ministry here was a tremendous blessing to Myers Park Presbyterian Church and to our community. And so he's going to be talking a little bit about what's ahead for church, and I look forward to his wisdom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Eason.
After that, Joe and I are going to get married. I know. You don't want to talk about that issue anymore, do you? Yeah, well, she's right here. We would get married, but we have gorgeous wives, so not going to happen. Good morning. Man, this is awesome to come home. Got out of the car and looked up over the building and turned to Catherine and I said, I poured some blood into this place. And she looked over and said, yes, you did. It was good blood. It's good to be with you. So I'm retired now, officially. Yeah. I don't wear socks to remind me that I don't work. It's the first time I've had pants on in 3 months. I mean, I had shorts on. Creates a mental image, doesn't it? Running around retired and naked. So somebody said, how's retirement? I said, what part of it would not be good? It's awesome, and we were ready for it. We have 4 grandchildren. And we're doing some traveling around. We've got a little place in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. We got a place in Brevard, so we'll start living soon between the two, which isn't bad. And as long as we have our health, we'll be able to do that. So the Lord's been good. It's been 40-some years in serving churches, and now I know what people do on Sundays. I'm out, no wonder there's nobody at church. And even I like being out. It's kind of, I'll start going back. Maybe. While we were here, Gene Ford and Leighton are connected to the church here. They set it up for us to have a time with Billy Graham. And we went to the Park Hotel then on a Sunday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and Dr. Graham was there for a board meeting here in town. So he gave us 2 hours. With Catherine and me and nobody else. Gene left, said, I want you to have this time with him for yourself. And he had just stopped doing crusades. He just announced, I'm not doing another one. So I was like 48 years old back then. And what do you say to Billy Graham? So I said, congratulations on retirement. And he looked down at his cowboy boots and kind of shuffled a little bit. And he said, well, Steve, I can't find the word retirement in the Bible. I said, well, if you can't find it, it's not in there. Yeah. And he said, how would you ever retire from a call from God? And I turned to Catherine and I said, well, there goes the pension fund. Yeah. How do you retire from your baptism? How do you quit being who you are? And it just a lot of wisdom in that, But what he did say was, we all change the way we serve. And that's what we're doing right now. We're changing the way we work and contributions that we're able to make, but not on the loop that we were on for all those years. So I'm glad to be here. And thank you for the hospitality. Joe, thank you. And if the wives pass away, let us pray. God of grace, we thank you for friendships and for the gift of memory and for your eternal spirit, which gives us hope and peace in this world. Open us now to your word of truth and grace, that we might be renewed this morning. Through Christ we pray. Amen. A text I'm bringing is Matthew 16, 13 through 20. You'll know this story. Jesus and Peter have an interesting conversation. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The word of the Lord. We've got this home in Brevard. We had it while we were here, and we have a daughter there, Lee, and 2 young grandchildren. And we're hanging off a cliff on a knob, and we got a beautiful view of the west and sunsets, and it's a real gift to be able to be there. But the backyard kind of drops off, and off the deck going down the mountain is a bank of azaleas, and probably 20, 25 azaleas. And I kept looking at those azaleas. They had grown up quite a bit, and I thought, I need to cut those things back. So I didn't say anything to Catherine about it. That's mistake number 1. Okay. But I did go to YouTube to find out how to do it. I wanted to do it right. Said wait till they bloom. When they're finished blooming, cut them back to 16 inches. Well, I'm out there with a measuring tape. I mean, I cut them 16 inches with the slant cut on them, the whole thing right after they bloomed. And when I finished, 25 azaleas running down the bank, got up on the deck, looked down, and every single one of them looked dead. I mean, it looked like I killed them. I was, panicking that I had overcut these things, put them out at the wrong time. So every day I'd go out to the deck, look down at these sticks, that used to be beautiful azaleas. And I prayed over those azaleas. I'd say, dear Lord, if you'll bring life back to these azaleas, I'll stop drinking. I mean, I bartered with God. I prayed over them. I agonized. And months passed of me doing this. And then one day, this is true. One day, I looked off the deck and I looked down, and it's pretty far down, drop. And I saw one tiny green leaf, just one. You'd have thought I had a baby. I was ecstatic. Life is coming back into dead things. I broke out. I sang, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." I upped my pledge to the church for that green leaf. I took pictures of it, sent it to all my friends. Look what happened. Life came back to dead things. I opened a bottle of wine for dinner. Well, I do that all the time anyway. But I did it just to celebrate the tiny green leaf. I mean, I was celebrating life. Some would say the church, and it's hard to imagine that here in this beautiful room with all of you this morning, but some would say the church, the Protestant mainline American church, looks dead in America, like my azaleas. It looks like it's dying. And as I traveled around the country with Macedonia, and I got off the block, so to speak. My whole life had been here, or a lot of it. And then I traveled around to Montana and Iowa and Phoenix and Florida and all over the place. I got to see the church off the block, and it looked like my azaleas, like it was dying. Overall attendance is down in churches. People aren't getting up on Sunday morning going to church. Money's down. People that I talk to would say, our finances are shrinking. Church scandals and controversies like the gay issue and other things have had a negative impact on gaining new members. Who wants to join a club where everybody's fighting, with each other? But it's also had a negative impact on keeping the old members we've had for years, because some of them got tired and left. Clergy burnout has increased over the years to where in the PC USA, just our denomination, this is an incredible figure, we lose 50% of clergy within the first 5 years of their first call. Did you get that? All the investment we put into somebody going to seminary, from their church to the loans out of the endowment fund and the whole thing, and half of them come out to serve the church in some way, and we lose half of them in the first 5 years out. We have too many seminaries in the Presbyterian Church. We've got 11, and we probably need 3. And the seminaries are chewing their fat off by eating their endowment at too high a rate. So it's just a matter of time before some of them have to close their doors or merge. And we have fewer students going into the ministry to lead. And when you add to all that, we have increasing religious and political polarization. And you've seen that, feel it. It's a part of the American culture today. You're either far left or you're far right. I think the middle has died. I don't know. Centrists are hard to find. And there's a growing distrust of all institutions, and we've given our young people good reasons not to trust institutions, whether it's banks, hospitals and doctors, priests, pastors, coaches. All the things that we used to hold sacred, we've seen in our lifetime crack, and we've seen the weaknesses. And your children and my children, and especially my grandchildren, have grown up in an environment where they've pulled back the curtain and seen, the truth about humanity at its worst in some of our places. And add to that a growing secular American culture. We've gone from Sabbath to Sunday to the weekend. And Sunday is another Saturday. It can be a bleak picture. And we've seen disaffiliation in the church, in the mainline church and in the Presbyterian church, disaffiliation spiked and began a strong rise in disaffiliation in the year 1990. Now, we're not exactly sure what happened in 1990, but on the charts, that's where we began to see losses magnified. Pew Research said from 2007 to 2014, the mainline Protestant church declined by 5 million people from 2007 to 2014. 5 million people we lost to death or dropout. And that data is 6 years old today, so 14% or less of Americans identify with the mainline church. Less than 14% of the nation identifies with what once was the mainline church. If we were IBM, we would push the panic button as a business. The losses are too great. It's time to get an exit strategy, to sell our business, to get out of this and cut our losses. But we're not IBM. We're the church. So with those current trends that I've been reading about and studying and seeing across the country and working with churches and clergy, it's made me ask the question, will our children, and especially our grandchildren, will they belong to a church? And many of our adult children aren't going to church. We took them to church. We put them on youth trips, and they were confirmed, and we lost them. And there was a day when adult children would get lost for a while, and then they would have children, and then they would come back with their children. What's happening today is less of them are coming back with their children. They're living in a secular culture where all of their peers are enjoying Sundays in different ways, and church is not a part of it. Does this mean they don't have faith, or does this mean they're evil people? No. It means the growth and the projections for churches and our memberships, which give us vitality both financially, that we can do some of the good work that we do, that we can maintain our facilities that we've built, that vitality is draining to a level of concern, deep concern. Some churches are a roof away from extinction. When their roof goes, it's over. They can't afford to put a roof on. Everything in that building gets wet, it's gone, and there's a group of little old ladies and men who just can't afford to keep it. And churches are being sold in America at a high rate. There was a time in this country when we didn't ask the question, will our children belong to a church? It was assumed they would, and they did, but that day is over. It's not a given. So the answer to the question is obviously yes and no. some of our children will belong to a church and some of them won't. But what is also obvious is that less of our children and even less of our grandchildren will belong to a church if we stay on the current trend. If we stay on the tracks that we're on now, there's a high chance your grandchildren won't ever know what really the church is about. We've tried stylistic changes, changing the music, changing the dress, changing, having coffee, all that. But that hasn't really moved the needle all that much across the country. Even mega churches today, the churches that sometimes we mainline people look at and admire like, ooh, we need to be more like them. Even those churches, the needle is now slowing down to a stop. And when the needle of growth stops, it begins to die. I don't wish that for mega churches, but the trend for them, they're not growing at the rates they were. And some are writing that perhaps this was a fad in our culture and that our kids went to those churches for a while and then they decided, no, that's not for me. Or people our age went to those churches and realized this isn't where I want to have my funeral. I actually had a guy here, you might be here, who came back. Don't raise your hand if it's you. But he went to Forest Hills and he came back and had a meeting with me. He said, Steve, my wife and I want to come back and join Myers Park. I said, well, that's great. I didn't ask him why. I thought if you want to tell me that you can. If you don't, it doesn't matter. And he said, well, I'll tell you why. I said, okay. He said, I was sitting in church and I love Forest Hills, and I know David's not there anymore, but I had a relationship with David and all that. So this isn't against Forest Hills. It's just the concept differences. And he said, I was sitting there one day in church, and I looked down at the front, and it's an auditorium, and it has a stage and the band and the lights and all this stuff. And he said, I just couldn't see my casket down there. All right, the guy clapping, it's him. I mean, you wouldn't believe the kind of meetings we have down in this office, right? I mean, if we could talk, you'd have to shoot us. I mean, you'd have to shoot us. So I'm like, so you came back to Myers Park to die? Is that what you're telling me? I said, I got plenty of those already. He said, no, I realized I wasn't home, and I needed to go home. I said, okay, welcome back. For some people, this is home. This is what church feels like to us. This is where we're comfortable. We know how to do this. For other people, this is a foreign land. And when they walk in, they don't know the Apostles' Creed. They don't know the Lord's Prayer. They don't know the Scriptures. They don't know to say the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. They don't know what the rules are. It's like somebody going to the Y for the first time, which they do in January, And they go in, and they don't know how the equipment works. They don't know, where the lockers and the shower. They don't know how the thing works. And so they feel awkward. And when they come to church, they have some of the same feelings. And sometimes we don't do such a great job at helping those newbies come into our family system because we all grew up with this. But less and less people are coming to see us. And the trends, if they continue, my grandchildren may not belong to a church as I know it. We're not just losing youth, though. Some people would come to us and say, Joe, Steve, we've got to find a way to get those youth back. That's not our problem. It's not a matter of trying to do something gimmicky to get your kids interested or to get them back into the building. That doesn't work. They smell that a mile away. Anyway, when you're trying too hard, hey, come back. We painted the youth room purple. It's like, yeah, that'll do it. You try too hard, they smell that. They don't want to be a part of that. They want authenticity. Okay, is that it? Yeah. I thought that was my phone. I thought that's going to be bad. They want authenticity. They want something real. But we're not just losing youth. We're now losing baby boomers who are retiring and who have been going to children's events for their whole lives on Sunday and Saturday and traveling basketball and all the other stuff. And now I don't have a schedule. The last thing I want to do is get up on Sunday morning. And besides that, we now have live streaming, so I can go to the Church of the Holy Comforter. That's the bed. So is live streaming working against us, making it easier not to be here, to be a part of the community? I don't know. We are trying everything we can to stay alive. We're open to new ideas. What will it take for people to want to be a part of a church community again? We're also losing working class people in America. We're losing the Midwest. And that was a group that always went to church. No matter what, you get up and you go to church. And now they're not going to church. And they're not paying pledges, and they're not supporting the ministry of a local church. And so I'm going to add some more dirt to this. Our oldest members are our largest contributors, and that would be of no surprise to you. But our older people who grew up in the church, they pledged, some tithe, but they're just generous. They were taught to be generous to the church. They're dying and they're leaving us. I mean, I'm 65. I can't believe that. So think of the people who were my seniors that we're losing. And some of them have been carrying the weight of this institution, Myers Park, for a long time. When we lose them, there's nobody behind them to replace them. One year we did the math here, and it would take 19 average pledges just to replace our top number one pledge. 19 average. When people join the church and they're brand new, they don't give the average pledge. They give well below that. So you've got to gain 19, 20, 25, even 30 families to replace Miss Smith or whoever. It becomes a dire situation. So what? Did I come back home to tell you the church is dying and you need to close the doors? Yep, so have a good day. Of course I didn't come home to tell you that. Quite the opposite. Jesus said this. I want to get into this text just a little bit and we'll have a Q&A. He said, on this rock, and there's some debate about whether he's talking about Peter the rock, or am I going to build the church on Peter, which the Catholic Church would tend to lean over there. Did he mean rock the earth, or did he mean rock the confession that I am, or profession, that I am the Messiah, the Son of the living God? Upon this rock, this foundational profession of faith, that tends to be where a lot of we Protestants land the plane, is that the rock Jesus is talking about is a profession and an openness and to admit that Christ is Lord and Savior of our life. That's the rock on which I'll build the church. Either way you take it, he says, on this rock, interesting pronoun, I will build my church. That tells you a lot about the situation we're in right now. One, we're not the builders. And two, we're not the owners. And anything that Christ built and anything he owns, I'm going to trust he's going to take care of it. So and you say, well, that's pietism at its best, Steve. That's kind of Pollyannish. I mean, let's sit back and Jesus will take care of the church. That doesn't mean that Christ will save the American mainline Protestant church. When I think of that, I don't think Jesus is going to save this brand of church. I just think it means he owns the church, capital C. And that the church might be pruned, as my azaleas were, but the church won't die. He says this, the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Hades is an interesting choice of words. It has a different connotation in the Bible than does hell. And most people think they're the same thing, but they may not necessarily be the same thing. Hades actually means the abode of the spirits of the dead, the abiding place for the spirits of the dead. Hell is a place of suffering where punishment is inflicted on those who are evil. It's a different concept. So is this semantics, or is Jesus trying to say Hades, a place of death, will not prevail against the church, meaning death cannot overcome the church? Death will not be an option for the church. Things need to be pruned, don't get me wrong. And the American mainline Protestant church, I think, is entering a season of being pruned, of being cut back. And it may look like we're dead, as my azaleas did, and somebody needs to pray over us every day looking at the sticks. But we prune things to cut away what has grown dead, to cut it back to a place where there's life. If the church is being pruned today, it's being cut back to a place where it's vital. The stuff that's not doing us any good is being lopped off, and we're being reduced to the core of who we are. You know, Peter Drucker was one of the founding fathers of modern management theory. And one of the things that stuck in my mind that he had was five elements of an effective plan. Very simple stuff. But the first one was abandonment. That in order for you to move forward, you need to stop doing some things that are no longer productive and they're not working for you. That's true in an individual's life. It's true for a bank. It's true for a church. There are things you need to abandon. They don't need to keep going with you. But the second thing he said was concentration. There are things in your business or things in your church that you need to drill down on and concentrate even deeper on the good things you are doing. Get rid of the dead stuff. Drill down on the stuff that has life in it. The third thing he said is every organization has got to learn to innovate. What needs to be created that's not there? Where are the dreams for this organization? Where's the vision for this organization? Where's the dreams and vision for the American Protestant church? And then he said there's risk-taking. In every plan, there's where's the calculated risk? How much risk are we willing to take? Churches are notorious for not being willing to take much or any risk, or innovate, or abandon things that are no longer working. And finally, he says analysis is the last piece, which, what do we not know? We don't know whether we should abandon this or not. We don't know if we should concentrate on this or not. We don't know whether we should innovate here, and we don't know what risk we should take. So analysis is part of learning what we do not know. The church may need to pull into Drucker's garage and learn some things about moving forward in an environment that's declining. What kind of plan are we? What do we have? What are we doing? What business are we in? Now, I want to say this. I want to be very careful to say that those who are dropping out of the church, and many of those are our children, by the way, many of those who are dropping out of the church or those who never drop in are not evil people. And nor do you have to belong to a church in order to be a Christian. There's nowhere in the Bible that says if you're a Christian, you have to belong to a church. But many of those outside the church are doing some incredible things to change the world. And when you look at our younger people, they are less racist and they are a lot more open to diversity. And they have something to bring to the table. And if they are to be a part of a church, the church needs to be clear about who we are and who we are not. And we need to stay focused. Rather than judge others for not coming, we do well to deepen the reasons why we're here. Now, the bottom line, and wrap it up, is this. Jesus made a promise that death cannot prevail against the church. There will always be a tiny green leaf of hope and new life. So our children and grandchildren may or may not belong to the church as we know it. I don't even know if my kids floss their teeth, so how do I know? But I do know this, the church will always belong to them. The church will never abandon them. And Christ created it, and Christ is the owner of it. And I think we can take great comfort in the fact that death, it might look different, but death is not an option. Blessings on you, your families. I'm grateful to be back. Thank you for all the tiny green leaves you gave me in 13 years. Amen. I know they wanted to do quick Q&A, and you want to get out of here at 8:30. So anybody have a question, I'll be happy to respond to it. Yeah. I don't think of it. The question is, am I saying the mainline church needs to be more evangelical? I guess I don't. There's things about that word that I'd have to unpack for a while, because that's turned into, that has different meanings for different people. I mean, when you say evangelical, some people say far right politically. Yeah, no, I don't think I'm saying that. I think what I'm saying is to what Joe said about go to deeper waters. I think the church needs to get real clear about who it is. Not so much mark it out trying to get people to come in, but to dive deeper in who we are. And that will attract people to us or not. I mean, there's no guarantee that, but I think chasing people, and I know that's not what you're saying, but chasing people to join a membership to get a pledge card, those days are kind of over. But evangelicalism in the sense of proclaiming our message of good news, that's what evangelical means. Yeah. I mean, so I would say, yeah, I think we need to know what the message is and what we're doing. What are we doing? I mean, are we in the social service business to eradicate poverty? Are we in the children's business to, I mean, you know, what are we doing? And I think getting more and more clear about that is going to happen because we're being pruned back. Yeah, I don't want to, yeah. Well, you know, I teach preaching with Tom Toole, a guy who used to be at Fifth Avenue. We have 2 classes and an endowment group that supports us in doing this. So I've got these young preachers that we're working with, and they are really struggling on how to speak truth in the midst of these political splits and things. And we talk about that in class. I think my gut tells me some people are doing a bad job of it, and other people are doing a very compassionate, caring job of it, and some people are not doing anything about it. And I think there's truth in the gospel that applies to life. Politics, policies that affect people's lives, that's what politics is. That those who are part of the nation, we all help each other and as capitalists and as a democracy, and that's the idea, but it doesn't always work out that way. But I think the pulpit has a place to speak to the ethics of Christ, and for those to be applied, whether you're in politics or you're, whether you're a doctor or whoever you are. And so how do we get deeper into the ethics of Jesus without sounding too pietistic? But to stand up and put a stake in the ground and say all Democrats are socialists and they're going to hell, or to stand up and say all Republicans are right-wing fanatic, whatever. I mean, that's not doing anybody any good. We've tried all that. It doesn't work. Somebody needs to start talking to each other for the sake of the country. So I think preachers are trying to get at that without losing their jobs. I mean, you know, it's all that. Yeah. Philip went to seminary at Princeton, came out, was an associate for a while in Columbia. Then he was a prison chaplain in a maximum security prison. And he just kind of got burned out on that and took a year to teach. And he fell in love with teaching. And he now is a teacher in a magnet school for the arts. He teaches music. He's the drumline coach for the high school marching band that our grandson plays the quads in that. And he's found his passion for music has always been there. So he's doing that. He's still a Presbyterian minister, but doesn't have a church. That's why he's so happy. And then Lee, I mean, he's ecstatic, you know. This is great, Dad. I'm a Presbyterian minister, no church people. Yeah. I didn't figure that out until later in life. So Lee lives in Brevard, where we live. That's why we bought the house. She's a nurse. She works with diabetics, and she is a diabetic. Has two of our grandchildren, 6 and 5. Philip has two of our grandchildren, 13 and 11. And then our baby is out in Lincoln, Nebraska. She's now 34, Sarah, and married, and they're trying to have a family and trying to find, he's in healthcare. He manages doctors' groups and does value care, which is kind of a niche, I guess. And she's in finance for the hospital. So they're looking for a job back here on the East Coast, and we'd love for them to get back. But yeah, they're doing okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, this church gave me the opportunity to go to Malawi and Congo and, you know, all these places, El Salvador, where people don't have anything, you know, coming to church dependent on God. They're dependent on God. And they need God's blessings, and not as much as competing for their time. And the more money you have, the harder it is to have church. Europe has shown us that. The great cathedrals of Europe are now doctors' offices and law firms and dance studios. 3% of the population in Scotland goes to church. 97% doesn't. That's our mothership. That's where we came from. Many of our Scottish friends say we're on the same track. We're just 10, 15 years behind them. So where prosperity starts to take over, and we start to have the freedoms to travel and go and do, and you can very easily start to feel you're the master of your own fate till somebody tells you have cancer. Church is kind of an attachment to your life. When you live in poverty, it's your lifeline. So there's no way to make this group impoverished, so church would mean more to you. So, I mean, that wouldn't be a good goal anyway. So how do you take people who are strong and use them for the sake of the gospel? Do you have to become weak first? Well, that's another lecture. But yeah, one more. Tim.
Steve, can you talk to us about retirement? What you've learned? A lot of us are thinking about that, and what do you see? How do you do it?
I'd go to your office right now and quit. Okay, one more question? I mean, people have said, how are you doing with retirement? And I'm like, what part of it would stink? You know, I mean, I get up, I have coffee, I read, I listen to the news, I get mad, you know, and then I work for Catherine Eason all day. I mean, but I don't go to meetings, I don't have to raise money. I miss preaching, I miss teaching. I guess I just don't miss the routine, the schedule and all. One thing I did do that I didn't do on purpose, but I kind of put wheels down at 30,000 feet and started a slow descent. You know, I didn't just jump I just didn't jump out of the plane at 30,000 feet here at Myers Park. And so I put wheels down. I did the consulting for a year and realized I just missed the pulpit. I just missed church. I couldn't believe it, but I did. And I went back and did an interim at First Church Richmond, and then followed that with an interim at Sequoia Hills. Both of them are like 1,200 member churches, but both of them needed a total overhaul. Great churches. They just had kind of been, they had a lot of needs. And I love doing that kind of stuff. I love overhaul work. So I get up in the morning, I had something to do. I understood it. But I was wheels down. I wasn't working at the level I was here. So by the time I finished Sequoia, I was on the runway. And I had people call and say, could you do another? I mean, you can spend your whole life doing interims. People, there aren't that many of them, people doing it. And I just said, you know what? I need a break. Before Bob Mason died, he and I talked. He was kind of a mentor to me. Chairman of my search committee brought me here. Kind of like a father figure, actually. And I told Bob what I was thinking about, and he said, I just think you need a break. And those words stuck with me. I needed a break. So it's been good. But I like that descending rather than parachuting kind of approach. And I didn't plan that. I didn't know what I was doing. But if I had it to do over again, I like that. And I'm still doing some contract work, but I tell Catherine every day, I used to be somebody. And she says, yeah, you did. Take out the trash. And it's okay. It's okay with me that, all the titles and, all that stuff. After a while, it's okay for you to just kind of go back and be who you were. And some days I feel like now I don't have all those straps, and I feel more like the kid I was when I was in high school. And I wasn't anybody really, I was just one of the guys. I feel that way today a lot. I'm just one of the guys. Speaking of which, I played golf with this guy yesterday. Shoots a 75. Yeah. And didn't make me pay my debt. So it's just nice being one of the guys again. So. You guys, you ladies and men have been wonderful. Thank you for letting me come home and reminisce and be a part of this. It's been so good to see all of you and shake your hand and see how well you're doing. And Joe, you're a great guy to let me do this. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. If I could just have a couple of quick points, housekeeping points. We've got a survey that's coming out. We need your feedback. Let's give one more round of applause to Steve's boss, Catherine Eason, for letting him come here. And if one or two people at each table could clear the table and take it to the back right corner, it'll help us out a lot. Thank you.